Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future is Bilingual podcast. My name is Heather. Today's episode is with my co-host and very good friend, Marcin, and I'm so excited to bring him back on the podcast. If you are new, first of all, welcome. And second, you can go find my interview. It was in 2 parts with Marcin if you don't know who he is and you want to hear his language story. My story is also back in episode 2. So I encourage you to listen to both of those if you're new and not sure who we are. Today, we're going to talk about apps versus writing things down and taking notes. I thought this might be a good topic because in the new year, a lot of us, myself included, have made goals and things that we want to accomplish. And oftentimes that's related to language learning. So I thought that this topic could be interesting on just to talk about how maybe we learn best. We're not going to give you the answer. There's no one right way to do this, but we're just going to talk a little bit about advantages and disadvantages to both and how we incorporate them into our studying and hopefully maybe introduce you to something that might work well for you. So without further ado, let's get into the talk. Welcome back, Marcin, to the Future is Bilingual podcast.
Hello and welcome to all the listeners.
We're going to talk about using apps to learn languages versus taking notes and writing things down. So we have some disclaimers. First of all, we are just 2 people, and we're just going to share our opinions and what we think is an advantage versus a disadvantage.
We've also I'm young, obviously.
Hey.
I'm older than you. But yeah, we started learning before anybody had an iPhone in their pockets. So even though we've probably adapted fairly well, we started way before apps or smartphones were a thing.
Yes, so we've been learning languages longer than apps have been around. But yeah, we both enjoy using them. So it's not that we're on one side or the other of this argument per se.
Yeah.
We also are not sponsored by any of the apps we're going to talk about. I'd gladly welcome sponsorships by any of them, but for the moment, we're not sponsored, right. And we have not tested all of them. So we might mention apps that we've heard about from other people. We're putting them out there so that you can go and look them up, but we have not tested them all.
Right. And we have to say that every person learns differently. So it's there will be no absolutes at the end of the episodes where we say this is the way to go. We will talk about some good things and some bad things about different ways of learning and what benefits they might give you.
Yeah, but we definitely encourage you to think about what works best for you and to really reflect personally on what you think, if you agree with what we're saying or you disagree, and just knowing more about yourself. So I think a lot of people, I don't know if it's more than in the past, but definitely a lot of people are learning languages on their own and seeing benefits from that. And maybe they had a hard time learning it at school. Maybe that's just the generation we're in, that we're not in school anymore. So we have to learn on our own, I guess.
Maybe, but I do like that you say, know yourself, like get to know yourself. That's very good.
So we are going to talk about some apps. We're going to start with that, and then some other non-app resources that you might use if you're writing things down, and then just go back and forth with different benefits and disadvantages. Okay, so we have a lot of apps. Marcin, why don't you start? You could even start with just ones you've used.
I can. We can start with that, and then we can mention some other ones. But I think the big one that most people who are interested in languages know is Duolingo. That's the one I've used the most and the longest. Probably, I don't know how long. Maybe about 5 years, 6 years by now. So
I think longer. We've both been on.
Yeah.
I believe I've been on since 2014, but I have not been using consistently for that long.
And I'm pretty sure I was using it before you. Quite certain of that. So that's the one we definitely know best. And but I've also used Mango Languages, which I got through my library, and a lot of libraries carry it, and there are some interesting things about it. And then Memrise is another quite a popular one. And then very, very long time ago, I did use Rosetta Stone. That was the I think that was the first resource I had for German when I started learning it.
Is that an app?
Rosetta Stone was a program.
Like a CD?
Oh, good. Yeah, it was, but I think they did adapt it to an app.
I have not looked it up.
And then I did try Busuu for a little bit, and I did do DW, like the Deutsche Welle, but that was not so much an app as their like website resources.
Okay.
To learn. Yeah, so there are maybe some other ones that I've tried that I might not necessarily remember.
So like you, I've also used Duolingo, Memrise, Mango. I've tried it in the past, and then I tried it again recently through my local library. I've used Busuu, but I don't even, it's been so long, I don't really remember. Recently, I tried Drops for Japanese, and I don't know why, it just didn't really click with me, but some people love it. I've heard a lot of people say good things about it, so don't take my word for it. Quizlet, I used a lot with my students, and so that's a very popular one. We used it almost entirely for vocabulary. I've seen people do grammar, like you have to match the subject with maybe the verb or the verb ending. Doesn't work so well in French or English because a lot of things don't change, but things like Spanish, Polish,
right?
You can get creative. And it's great for the classroom because you can do games. So I do like Quizlet. Can't really say I've used it too much for myself. And then Utalk is a new one that I found out about during the Polyglot conference. They were a sponsor and they worked with the Langfest crew. And I really like that app, actually. I feel like they have tons of languages. I forget the exact number, but they have like tons and tons. And I don't know, the sounds are very satisfying. Like, you know how, I don't know, it's very important when you're doing practice on an app that like, it's not an annoying sound. I think that might have been what was annoying me with the Drops.
Yeah, you paid closer attention during the conference than I did.
That was a fun conference. So some other ones that people have mentioned or that I've heard about, Babbel, Conjuu with 2 U's. You mentioned the DW. I wasn't even sure what that was. Falou with an OU at the end. The FreeRice. I did actually try that one. It's kind of cool. So you play games and you can learn all sorts of things, not just languages. And every time you get, I believe, 10 right, it like donates. I don't know. I forget how much rice. But I guess it's like a way to help donate rice to people. I don't really know how it works, but it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I believe HelloTalk is like a way to meet natives and have conversations. I don't know if it's chat or voice, video. I'm not really sure. Have you heard of that one?
No.
So I think HelloTalk is similar to Tandem. I think they both match you up. So you can have like practice with a native speaker. So I don't know how that works, but haven't tried it yet, but it sounds good. LingQ, I've heard good things about. Lingodeer, have not tried. Lirica, is that something with singing? I don't know, it sounds like it should be.
It might be. For all I know, I have not tried it.
Yeah, and then the last one on here that we didn't mention was SuperMemo, SuperMemo, maybe. So yeah, there's lots of those. So yeah, and if you guys have any more that we forgot to mention, you can let us know. Comment on Instagram, email me at tfibpodcast@gmail.com. You know, we'd like to know more things that are out there, especially if it's something that you really enjoy using and you think others should know about. And are these all free? Do we know? I mean, I'm assuming everything has a free trial, at least.
Yeah. As far as the apps go, all the ones that I've tried, they were free. That was usually a big, especially when I was younger, that was a very important feature because I did not have the money to spare on a lot of different resources.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever bought an app, actually, in my whole life.
Since, and this year I bought the Duolingo, the premium access to it, but it's only been a couple of weeks, so I don't yet have a very extensive experience with the premium version.
You fell for the deal. I saw that. It was like
I did
some percentage off.
Yeah, it was like half off or something.
Yeah, it was like 65 maybe. I forget.
Yeah,
it was good though. Okay. So that's for apps, and you guys might know more than what we mentioned, but again, they're continuously coming out with more. there's definitely apps that are more specific to, certain languages that we, of course, didn't mention if we're not aware of them. So we're just two people, remember? So for the writing down resources, it's a little bit more vague and open, because the method here is just to write things down. So you could really use anything. So to kind of organize it, I divided it into 3 categories. So the first one is written. So if you're using a book, like a traditional textbook, or it could just be, a book that you're reading in that target language, anything that's a website, that's just text, newspapers, magazines. Can you think of anything else we might have forgotten?
Those are the main things you're gonna be reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's getting a lot more detailed if you're
For
down
sure.
to flyers and brochures. Yeah. But you will learn some very specific vocab that way.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first category.
Yeah. And then you have audio, which is podcasts, one of our favorites.
Of course.
And then audiobooks, and then there are many free ones on Spotify that I've definitely listened to. A fair amount of choices in German, more than English, I think.
That's so good to know. I never look for that. I don't really use Spotify much.
There are Polish audiobooks as well. Many of them are, well, the books are open, like they're like from before like 1925, I think the year is now. So they're in the public domain, but I can't imagine the recordings. The recordings are not from before then. So
okay. That's good.
But they might be, yeah. But some of them are professional recordings by some well-known people and actors voice actors who do recordings, and they're quite enjoyable.
I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, and then good old radio and music. And I think both of us very much always give a shout out to music as a really good way to engage in your target language.
Yeah, I used to use a lot of songs, and I would make these worksheets where the specific words were missing. So, it might be vocab if we've done a lot of vocab on a certain, like I find a song that's talking a lot about, I don't know, like romance or something, if it's a chapter on that. And I've done ones where I've taken out verbs. So like a lot of times you can easily find songs that are all in the past and then take out all the past verbs. Yeah. So sometimes it's really challenging. Like you see the students like really concentrating and like we'll listen to like a part of the song over and over. But I think it is a really fun way. And then afterwards we would watch the video. And sometimes it's funny. But music is such a
But did you take the course at UMass that was Polish through music and song and?
No, I did a film course.
Oh, I did. I did that too. Not in the same semester, but yeah, there was a Polish course that was using songs as the basis, and obviously other colleges have languages that they do that as well. But yeah, that's a very good thing to adapt.
Yeah, it's a fun way to learn. So I think a lot of people already do this. So maybe you're not using any like resources, you're just listening to a song, but you can, if you're creative, you might want to create your own resources or print off the lyrics and just read through them so you can see the words. It takes a little bit of effort. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
And finally, things that might be a combo. So videos that have subtitles. If you print off lyrics to a song, that's also going to be a combo because you can read while you're listening. Different apps will have combo where you can hear and see it. And then, of course, some websites, if you have the ability to listen. So sometimes there's an audio recording of the blog post, for example. And we didn't mention Pimsleur, and I think we should, because I actually use that a lot, the CDs. You're talking about the CDs, right?
Yes. Yeah. So a language learning company, but it's like one company and there are others as well, I guess. But yeah, so I've definitely used German. Trying to remember if I used any other Pimsleurs.
Oh man, I used Italian because my mom had it when she traveled to Italy. I remember being young, like in high school, and walking around my town listening and saying, Dove via Veneto? Where is Veneto Street? I've used Italian, I've used Arabic, I've used Japanese. I'm trying to think what else I used. The Japanese was good. It got me a lot of basic stuff right before the trip. So yeah, I think they're really helpful. I'm also an audio learner. So just like I would do it in the car and just listen and then repeat. And it's very repetitive, but I think it's useful.
Yeah. I seem to recall that Pimsleur teaches you how to say beer and wine before they teach you how to say water. And coffee and tea. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by lesson 3, it's like, would you like to have dinner at my place? So it's very forward.
Yeah. It's a little odd for sure. And once you've done Pimsleur once, it's literally the same thing in the other languages, just, changing the names of the streets and things.
Just translated.
Yeah, it's totally, but I mean, I don't blame them. If I had a company with language learning, I would do the same thing. So, okay, so let's move on to the benefits of language learning apps.
I feel like I'm much more on the language learning app side of things than writing things down. So I can start, I guess. I do feel like it's worth mentioning there's like a certain amount of privilege that we want to recognize, that we are able to use our phones and use our computers with internet access to access all the resources. And that's not necessarily the case for many people in our society who might not have access to internet, might have limited minutes on their phones and that. So we are in a very privileged position for that. But if you are someone who does have like an unlimited data plan on your phone, then accessibility and availability are very big benefits of that, because you can, as long as you have your phone with you, you have all of your language resources with you as well. And because it's a lot less time constrained, because you can take your phone out of your pocket and start a lesson. There is no setup time. You don't need to go anywhere. And that gives you those short lessons, and that might be beneficial, especially at first when you're first starting out, and you haven't built that, the 50-minute like lesson into your day, and that would be, if you're starting from the beginning, you're not going to start by 50-minute lessons and then
it's hard to build up to that. And who knows, I mean, people have all sorts of circumstances why they might be on a shorter time strand. Like I'm doing mine, maybe in between when the kids are quiet for 5 minutes, I can quickly do like one little lesson on Duolingo.
I did so many lessons on the T, and when I lived in Boston and I was commuting to and from work, I'd either be reading a book or doing my language lessons on whichever app I was using at the moment.
I want to mention, because you talked about how this is a very privileged conversation to even be having about apps, and people might not have, even not just in this country, but in the world, they might not have a cell phone. They might not have, the data you were talking about. And I do want to say that the library still being closed is a huge disadvantage, because, even if you don't have access, you could go to the library for free and use their computer. So I just think a lot about the people that do, and you probably see it more than I do. I don't work at the library like you, but I'm sure there's like regulars that come in and use the computers.
Definitely. And it's, I've had patrons before we were able to set up an outdoor computer access. Patrons would call the reference desk and say, I haven't been able to check my email for 6 months. And that's difficult. And and once it gets warmer, if you do have a phone or a laptop, but you don't have internet, like our Wi-Fi is turned on. So as long as you're outside the building, you can still access it. But
that's a great point.
So many libraries will have that, but not necessarily all of the libraries. And obviously in the middle of winter, it's not the nicest time to be sitting outside a library trying to access the internet.
Not where we live.
We're not doing that for pleasure. Right. Yeah. Not where we live.
Not in New England for sure.
No.
But I just think that is, it's especially difficult in this time, because there were other ways to get around not having access to everything.
Yeah.
Okay. But to get back to the benefits, you don't need to have like a long amount of time. You don't need to be getting all these things out, like a pen and a notebook, and have your book and all these things. I also find it's more engaging. Like it's kind of like a game. And I know people have asked, like, is Duolingo really teaching you, or are you just playing a game? So we can talk about that in a bit, because I know we have more to say. I also like that a lot of the apps have listening practice. I think that's super helpful, because when I have studied just from a textbook, I'm maybe like, let's say Korean. I can read the Hangul and I can, guess how they're saying it, but a lot of times it's not exactly how it's written.
Yeah.
Or like things will change depending on which letter is before which letter. So I think having the listening is super helpful.
And English is very guilty of that. There are many
Sure.
words, even native speakers. If you only ever see a word in print, there's a chance you might be mispronouncing it your whole life and not know it because it's something that only shows up in print.
That happened to me often. My mom would always correct me and be like, "It's not said like that." I don't know.
Yeah, and that's very much like something.
Characteristic of
Yeah.
English.
So that's a good benefit of a language app. And one of the things that I liked about Busuu, to give a very specific thing, I know I said something wrong because I would misread it or something and it wouldn't catch it maybe. So I like when I was using it, you could record, they would give you speaking practice and you could record it and have native speakers, other users give you feedback on it. And I think that that's a big like plus for Busuu for the way they do that.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, a lot of like about probably half their content is behind a paywall, which I didn't like very much, but that you could still do. You could get feedback that way.
Yeah, and I know Duolingo has that as well for speaking practice. I mentioned it on an episode where the times I thought I was pronouncing Korean really well, it would like say, no, these letters, this word wasn't pronounced correctly. And the times when I felt like I was just like mumbling or like mispronouncing completely, it was like, ding, you've said everything perfect. So, even today I was doing it and it was, if I like messed up and reset it, it still gave me the check because I guess it's just, I don't know. So it's not the same as a native listening.
It feels like, I don't know, it's some type of algorithm that is trying to figure out your voice, which seems like a very difficult thing to do. So to have actual speakers and people doing feedback, that's a big plus. And I know with Duolingo, there have been times where give you the listening, but I don't know that the feedback on the speaking is, it might be a little subpar.
Right. But at least it's getting you to speak.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that is part of the practice, is just getting your mouth to kind of form the sounds, and even if it's not perfect.
And that's something Mango does. Like that's such a big part of Mango is that it just has you repeat every single thing. With like things like Memrise or Duolingo, you'll get a lot of multiple choice where it's like, oh, so which one is the answer? So it's easy to click on it. But with like something that Mango does is that it says like, so how do you say this? How do you say this? How do you say this? So every single thing, and it builds. So you might be spending a whole lesson on one sentence, which feels sometimes like they're overdoing it, but they'll have you repeat each word of the sentence and then put it together and then talk to you about how it's put together. So that's a nice benefit of a lot of these language apps.
Yeah, and they definitely are all built differently, and we can talk about that, if that's an advantage or a disadvantage. But getting back to, we just have a couple more advantages that we wanted to mention. I know both of us have had streaks on Duolingo, and I think having that like accountability, like, okay, I have to do at least 5 minutes or whatever your goal is, 10 minutes, you can set different goals. Having friends on there, it's kind of like having a Fitbit, like you're kind of competing against people. And you can of course do these things without having friends or without continuing a streak. A streak just means you're doing it many days in a row. But I do think it's, once you have a certain number of days, you don't really want to lose the streak.
Yeah, I mean, having friends is a different type of pressure. So it also depends on your personality. If you're someone who does interact with your friends a lot and you're very outgoing in that way, that'll keep you engaged. But for me, it was, I mean, not that having friends also studying wasn't beneficial, but just having the streak and not wanting to lose it. For probably 3 years in a row, I would lose a streak when I went on vacation, but then the rest of the year I would build up like 300-day streaks.
That's great. I don't know, it just makes it fun. It's like, okay, I just have to do like this one more thing and get these points. And I think there's also like rewards Is that what they call it that you get? Like, oh, you've learned 1,000 words, or
Right. Yeah. So
you've reached level 10. Like you get all these badges. Is that what
you
they're
get
called?
badges, you get gems. And also there was I don't know how much, there's probably some studies that I didn't think to look up, but the idea that um, the the audio feedback, the sound, the literal sounds,
Oh yeah.
like having a positive sound, like if the notes go up, it's positive, it goes down, it's negative. So you get something wrong, it goes doo doo, and then you get something right, it's like doo doo, and then so that's like that works on your subconscious and releases like your I don't know, your pheromones or whichever
the dopamine hit.
The code, yeah, whichever chemical is responsible for that, but it works on a level that it wants to engage with you that way, like games do.
Like, yeah, so it's like a game. And, there's also lots of proof that we're all addicted to our phones, and we're addicted to getting, the little bing when a message comes in.
Right.
So it's all kind of intertwined.
And I think Duolingo also pushes that, because I think one of the loading screens is like 15 minutes a day on Duolingo teaches you a language. What does 15 minutes on social media do?
I was just going to mention those little messages. Like, more people are learning languages on Duolingo in the US than in schools in the US. I don't know. They have all these little subliminal messages.
Yeah. They're like more people study Irish on Duolingo than there are native Irish speakers.
Yeah. But look, I mean, it's worked. We've memorized them. We've seen it so many times.
It's definitely true. Yeah, it's like watching commercials.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a couple other benefits.
Yeah, I think obviously, like everything we say, it depends on your personality, but apps do offer like a lower stress environment for learning. So if you feel intimidated, or if you're stressed out by other methods that feel overwhelming, it requires a lot less of your time, and the lessons are broken down into smaller bits. There's that accountability of having streaks and friends, but it's not like having a tutor that you're answering to, even if they're your friends. So it might be a lower stress environment.
And it's free, so you're not, if you stop, you're not losing money. You didn't pay for a class that you're not going to.
Yeah, so you can take it at your own pace.
No teacher yelling at you.
Yeah, some of those language teachers.
I know.
And one of the things that I like about the apps, that I think is one of their big strengths, is the vocabulary. I think they do teach you a lot of vocabulary. That's, at least in my experience, and for me, that's what I seem to get most out of them, is the sheer vocab. And we'll talk about the flip side of that coin in a second. But yeah, that's a good benefit for me.
Yeah, and you can kind of go at your own pace. It's not, it is kind of decided by someone else, but you can also, there is a little bit of leeway to skip around, maybe on other apps more than Duolingo. We're kind of talking a lot about Duolingo, but listeners, think your apps that you use, you might have some more, you can just do things at your own pace, maybe skip things if you don't want to go over them.
Yeah, like Lingo Languages, I think, gives you access to the whole course right away.
Really?
So you can jump into whichever lesson you want.
Oh, wow.
And Duolingo, you do have to unlock. And I think same with Memrise, you have to unlock.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like most that I've done you have to kind of like go through a certain, I don't know, parkour. What's the word?
Yeah. You have to,
I feel like that's a French word. I feel like that's not an English.
Parkour?
I mean, it's a word. It's like that sport where you're
very
jumping.
Specific thing. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the disadvantages, just because our minds are on the apps right now. You want to start with one?
I can, yeah. So the gamification aspect of it, the flip side of that is that you can engage with it, or you can complete it without deep engagement with it. So especially if it is, a lot of Memrise is built on having, click on the right answer with multiple choice. You can almost skim through it without really deeply engaging with it, and not learning as much from it. And I think that may or may not, but it may lead to like a misleading sense of accomplishment. And Duolingo used to do, I think they've stopped, they've done something else now, but it used to say like, you're 50% proficient in German. And
Oh,
I
yes. I
say
remember
like,
this.
no, I am not. I
Yeah.
am barely like an A1 still. Like I am not 50. I might have engaged with 50% of your content, but I am not 50% proficient in that language. Now they've changed it to like, you can take a quiz. And so I took the quiz and it rated me at like 2.5 out of 5. So I don't know if that's supposed to mean like
50.
you're 50%, but yeah, because I mean, on the one hand, if that's what it means, it's like, okay, I haven't progressed in 4 years, but
no, because I'm sure the quiz is
yeah.
differently set up than just
So I'm
you've
not
gone
sure
through
exactly.
50% of the material.
Right. Yeah. So I don't exactly know what the quiz is actually reflecting. But I know I paid for it, so I should get it out by the end of the year.
I think you're so right, though, that, just completing the tree, let's say, if you complete a Duolingo tree or you complete, Rosetta Stone or whatever the app or the CD or the thing is, that does not mean that you can actually use the language. I noticed that with myself, like I'm learning all this Korean and I can, read sentences and understand what they mean. However, it's a limited, they're giving me almost all the correct answers on the bottom.
Yeah.
Or, there's not like that many wrong because there's only so many spaces to put like the words. So there's like maybe 2 words that don't fit the sentence. And so I'm like, okay, I guess the word mango, didn't fit in this sentence. Or also like the pictures, I don't know. Sometimes it's just so obvious, like which one is the correct answer.
Because it is a product that they are selling to you. So they want your engagement. So they want to maximize engagement and
feel
that might
successful.
lose on and that might lose on like how deeply you engage with the material. So it's and they, whenever you see ads for them, it's like learn language in 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
5
you are
minutes
an
a day.
extraordinary person if you learn language in 9 weeks. Yeah, especially if you're doing it for 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that when you're jumping into these apps. Like it's not the end all
For sure.
of your language learning.
Yeah, I feel like you could go through and still have trouble like introducing yourself because like they're not going to give you all the words that you need to say everything you want to say. So it's definitely not tailored to you. It's also not chosen by you. So the apps that you have to unlock as you go, like you maybe can't skip through, even if you don't want to talk about animals or you don't want to talk about medical stuff. Like maybe I just want to skip that. Sometimes you can't, like you have to go through. I also think, there's definitely some faults. If I know French and Spanish and I take Italian, I can pass out of like 20%, but I don't even know how to say like a woman per se. I do now, but like I can skip without knowing a whole bunch. And same thing, like I tried Portuguese and it was like, you skipped out of all this. But then I was like, oh my God, I don't even like, they would ask like the most basic grammatical things. And I was like, I don't know. Like,
well, what are the articles in Portuguese, right?
Yeah. And I like wouldn't even know if it's, with an N or an M or.
And that's what I did with Ukrainian. It's like I tested out so much of it. But it's like I never studied Ukrainian. I don't know any Ukrainian, but because it's similar enough between Polish and whatever Russian I've studied, I was able to figure it out. But it's not like I could say I would just say things in Polish, and Ukrainian speakers may understand me.
Exactly.
It's not the same as like you've tested out of like all this material now.
Yeah. So definitely that false sense of success or false sense of accomplishment that you've, I don't know 20% of Italian just because I passed this test.
Right.
For sure. So yeah, it's fun, but it's definitely, we can't really say that like this is a certain level, doing these apps is not going to get you to a certain level on its own,
Yeah, and that's another thing they do is like they say like, oh, 20 hours of this app is equivalent to a college course, and I'm not sure that after 20 hours on whichever app it was, I progressed from like A1 to A2 or.
Yeah, it seems insulting to college level courses that
Right.
a teacher is putting a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, where you have that person that is giving you direct feedback.
Yeah, someone who's an expert in this subject. Let me see, did we miss anything? I think just the ridiculousness sometimes. This Duolingo is known for this. So you gave an example. I'm trying to think of, there's like a million examples.
Yeah, it's just one that came up today because I was testing out of an earlier skill, because every time they update the language, I lose all the, all the lessons are still open, but it's all the crowns are gone. So, and I like seeing all the gold there. I guess I'm vain like that. So I'm doing an early lesson, and one of the sentences that I don't remember seeing before was, how do you say the bear doesn't like this bank in German? So, and I remember another one was like, the mouse is addicted, which just, I mean, I don't know. On one hand, I remember the sentence like 3 years later. Never used it when I was in Austria or Germany, but maybe I'll use it one day.
Yeah, there's definitely been some weird ones. I think Italian, they gave me a sentence that was like, it is easier to die than to love. And I was like, whoa.
Well, that's some heavy, yeah, you expect
I'm not
that
even sure what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorites though is when I was studying Norwegian, and that's because I was going to Norway, so I wanted to learn some basics. And the sentence was, I still remember it, but it's like, Jeg er ikke en kvinne, which means I am not a woman.
Okay.
Which, I mean, one, you can probably tell, but also due to my like views on gender, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And another one, I don't actually remember the sentence in Norwegian, but it was like, whose underwear is this?
Oh, geez.
Which is quite an interesting one.
Yeah, that's just a weird combination, but yeah, they
I
probably was the clothing unit.
Yeah, but I feel
mixed
like
with the who's.
Yeah,
gone wrong.
Right. I feel like they do it on purpose.
It could be.
And some people will have.
Because look, we're talking about it.
But it's still not a useful sentence.
Well, maybe not to you, but.
I don't know which bear likes which bank, but I know how to say that in German now.
I mean, some of the sentences that seem ridiculous, though, like, my kids might say that, like they're playing with their bears. I could see them being like, this is not like this bank.
Okay, so
maybe Duolingo is just toddler language.
Maybe, yeah, it's for when I'm finally like a librarian in Germany, and like a German's like children's department of the library. Yeah,
you will be ready for all the made up, imaginative, creative play.
I will be ready to say, Die Bär mag diese Bank nicht.
There you go. All right, so we're going to switch gears and talk about writing things down. So I guess since Marcin, you said you like apps more, I do enjoy writing things down. Do you normally take notes when you're studying a language?
No, but
okay, it's easy.
That is, I mean, it's kind of like when I used to not have a flu shot. Like years ago, I used to not have a flu shot, and it wasn't because I didn't think it's better. It's because I was just not doing it. So, yeah, I'm not good about writing things down, but it's not because I think it's not beneficial. It's just being silly about it.
Yeah.
So, and I do know it, and I bring it up. I mean, it's your point, but it's I'm stealing it, I guess.
Go ahead.
There's a difference between writing things down and not writing things down when it comes to recall and sticking with you. And I bring it up with like reading ebooks versus reading paper books. Because a couple of years ago, I remember reading a study that talked about how students that were reading paper books had a better recall rate than students that read ebooks. And one of the possible explanations for that is that one of the ways you remember information is like you remember which part of the page it was on. It was like it was on the bottom left, versus like in an app, you like if you're reading an ebook, you will never have that because it doesn't stay. It's not a consistent place per se, like on the left side or the right side,
Yeah, I have two things with ebooks that annoy me. Well, three things. One is I don't have like a big tablet. I have my phone, so that's a huge disadvantage because it's just so small. And two is that you have to keep like scrolling or like next paging over more than you would in a regular sized paper book. with my small phone.
I also remember one of our mutual friend once, I went to his house and he said his e-reader broke because he sat on it.
Ooh.
And I remember saying, like, I never broke a book by sitting on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also an old person thing to say. So, yeah.
We're not 60 people. But yeah, I just think me and all of us spend way too much time on technology as it is, that like I use reading as my my downtime, as my, get my eyes like away from a screen.
Yeah.
And I'm not even using it as much as probably most people who are working from home, studying.
Yeah.
And I guess the fourth thing that I have against, we didn't even plan to talk about this, but here we go. The fourth thing I have against them is that I'm home with my children all day and I want them to see me reading books and not on my phone. Even if I'm reading a book on my phone, they don't know that. They think I'm scrolling Instagram or whatever I'm doing. So for me, like I am 99% like for books, for paperback. That's personal. You can be for ebooks.
And I mean, having said all that, I am 100% like a proponent of ebooks as well as paper books. And yeah, if that's your preferred method of reading, then I will
read. Yeah.
I will tell you all the library resources that can get your ebooks on your.
I just have my own personal, I don't know. I'm an old person.
I've seen your notebooks. You take when you're learning a language, you take so many notes. Like you have notebooks filled with notes. And I mean,
and I keep these. I have notebooks from college. Then that was 11 years ago. No, 11. More. 12 years, 13. I don't know. Many years ago. And I've held on to the language ones. I have eventually, little by little, I've been decluttering all the other anthropology and things that I'm like, I'm probably never going to use this again. But if I took notes in a language class, or just notes on my own, like I have my old Korean notes from like 2008 or something. So it's fun. It's fun to look back on.
Yeah. And it also helps with your recall rate, right?
Yes. So I did research, but there's just many, many studies that prove that taking notes by hand allows you to recall things better, just better memory. And so, this is versus like taking notes on a computer versus taking notes by hand. And I think it's even more important with apps versus writing, because with apps, all I'm doing is clicking the right bubble. Most of the time, I'm not even typing the word out. That's a whole different level. So I feel like a lot of the times this is like a 2-second, like click on the right word. So the times where I have had to write it down, it's definitely helped me. I guess I'm just a proponent for writing. I remember when I lived with my mom, this must have been in college during the summer, and I was learning Korean, just beginning to, I labeled a whole bunch of things in the house, like phone, TV, mirror, door. I just went around the house and like put labels on. And I still like, when the words come up on Duolingo, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this was the way the telephone was written. Like I remember having to write these things. So I just think, I don't know. For me, the act of writing is really helpful.
In a way, it's a mnemonic device. Like when you're walking around the house labeling things.
Yeah.
And 5 years, because I seem to recall Cicero did that. The like great Latin orator, like when he was known for memorizing or like being able to recall all of the speeches he was writing. And what I remember, unless I'm confusing him with another orator, but the idea was that what he did is that he did each part of the speech in like a different room in his house. So in it, when he was actually giving the speech, he would, in his mind, he would go like from one room to the next, and that was
imagine.
And then
it's a mnemonic. We could maybe do a whole lesson, a whole podcast on different mnemonic devices and ways to like recall things, because there's lots of them. But that's a good one, like different rooms, even if you study a different lesson in a different room. Again, this is talking from privilege. If you have more than one room, you're not in a studio apartment or something. I also think using, writing things down by hand, it's especially important, I find, when I've studied languages that don't use the Latin script, or if whatever is a different alphabet from your own. So I have lots of notes from studying Arabic, and it's super important because you're connecting all the letters together. So I found that to be just, primordial, that you actually do learn how to write the letters, you learn how to connect them, and how the words form, and if you're putting the accents, because when you first, I shouldn't say accents, the vowels, when you're first learning Arabic, there's different, you mark the vowels, but natives don't have to do that anymore. They just know what vowel sound is above, below. And same with Korean letters combine. There's like basically 4 little squares where they could go. So sometimes it's 2, 1 on top, 1 on bottom, 1 to the left, 1 to the right. It can be all sorts of combinations, 2 on top, 1 on bottom, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's just very helpful to practice writing.
I do remember, I mean, when I did a lot less Arabic than you did, but when I started learning the alphabet, I was using Duolingo, and I remember just that completely not sticking until I did just start writing everything down.
Yeah.
Because it would tell me like, what's this letter? It's like, no, I don't know. I've seen it 100 times. I don't have it memorized. And then I would start writing them down and practice writing them, and all of a sudden they're starting to stick.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really is helpful. So if you haven't, started writing down the language that you're learning, I think it could be helpful. I just did Greek just for fun, and nothing has stuck because I just did it on Duolingo recently, and I have not actually written down the letters. Like you said, they go through them with you, and I can maybe recognize like, oh yeah, that was the S sound or whatever.
Yeah.
But not having written them down, like, I think they're going to be gone. Like a week later, they're out of my head. So
one of the things I really like about what you wrote down in the notes is in the study is the difference between the recall rate of students who were using their laptops to take notes and handwriters, because I've read other articles that talked about it. Like if you're writing by hand, recall rate is better. But this study was interesting, and it's where it said that even though the students who use laptops were able to just write more words down, the people who were writing by hand were able to have a stronger conceptual understanding of the subject, which is just so important. And part of it is probably because you can't just write down verbatim what your professor is saying if you're writing by hand.
No.
So you have to, as you're taking in the information, you have to start understanding it to be able to rewrite it in a way that you can then study from. So yeah, I think that's a very important point from that study.
And I think some people might think it's better that, on the laptop I can type quicker. My notes are going to be more full or more complete or whatever.
More legible if you're me.
More legible.
I always ended up doing notes by hand in college and in grad school.
Yeah. And I think even when you were talking about that study, it just reminded me of like, what's that job in the courtroom where they're literally just, and I think even typing out verbatim what's being said.
Right.
That person is probably not thinking about the case. They're just focusing on the words, and they're just type, which kind of proves the point that like, you don't need to understand what's being said if you're focusing on verbatim,
Right.
Yes, if you go back later, then you can read through it and hopefully get more understanding out of it. But I don't think it's not the point. The point should be to listen to the professor and then take down what is essential from what they're saying. So I think that's kind of maybe a misconception with, I don't even know if they teach this, like how to take notes. Is that a subject that's taught? That was not taught in our high school. I don't, not when I was a student or when I was a teacher.
No, you have to figure it out for yourself. And I don't know that many students might not be able to do it.
So I guess to sum it up, I just prefer writing it down because I find personally, I remember it better. I engage more with the material, and hopefully I will recall it better than if I'm just clicking away on an app or even typing.
And I'm not as self-disciplined to write things down as much. So at least the apps and other podcasts and audiobooks and all that give me a way to do something rather than nothing.
Well, I don't want listeners thinking I have all these notes. Like I have barely time to like brush my teeth twice a day with 2 children.
Because you're taking all that time writing notes.
No. Yeah. I mean, part of me loves that. Like I love like okay, I'm gonna like study, and the kids are sleeping or something, and I'm gonna get my notebook out. And some people, there's all this talk on Instagram with people who study languages, this whole like accounts for language learning. But do you take notes in color or in black and white and all that? Yeah, like I'm totally super nerdy about that. Like I would, if I can, I'll do color coded and make it all pretty. I think it's just there's something very graphically satisfying for me with like making really beautiful notes, especially in languages that, like I said, don't use the Latin script. I don't know. It's like the language nerd in me. Like it just looks so cool to have like
it's
this other
another
script.
way. Yeah. It's like another almost mnemonic device in itself where like the color coding gives your brain, like teaches your brain to engage with that with each notes in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Okay. So there's definitely disadvantages to taking notes. Well, many, but it takes longer. You have to have some quiet time, space to like spread out your materials. You have to have materials. You have to find a resource yourself. Yeah. So, you can't just like sit. Most of us, if we're learning, we can't just like sit down and start taking notes. Like we need a resource that we're using, if it's a podcast or it's a book or it's, all the things we listed earlier. So yeah, you kind of have to find that yourself. Whereas if you just download the app, they've got it all organized for you. It's all set up. It's all in some sort of order, whether that be the correct order or not.
And you can get a lot of books from the library, but they eventually they will be due.
Yeah, that's my trouble, is I have all these grandiose plans and I take these books out and then I get through lesson 1 and 2 and then it's due.
Right. 2 weeks later, it's yeah.
And then I renewed it and it's still, So you have to be more disciplined and really, if I really like a resource, I could buy it, use the library as like a trial run.
Yeah. So, and it depends on your local libraries too, but like in our system, you get, it's a 3-week, some DVDs or new items are different, but like for books, you basically get 3 weeks with 2 renewals, but the renewals are automatic now, so you don't even have to worry about it.
So nice.
Yeah. So you have 9 weeks, which is a fair amount of time. It's not quite a full semester, but it's almost a semester's worth of, if you're in college, you probably don't have as much time to just learn a language on the side.
Mm-hmm. Although you could take, if you have extra space in your schedule, put it in your schedule if you can.
But another thing about libraries is that at least like in the US, generally speaking, your public your public universities, like the state schools, you can sign up for a library card with them, even if you're not a student. Although it's different now, I think during COVID you can't do it, but normally you can sign up for your university's like library card and check out books from them, and that'll give you like 3 months or something. That's what our state school does. So yeah, I get books from UMass for like months at a time.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's just you have to be willing to search and find the resource. One of the language people, if it was maybe Richard Simcott or Luca Lampariero, one of them was like, pick one resource and stick to it. I think it might have been Luca. He was saying like, people can sometimes be overwhelmed with all of the choices and like, oh, I'm going to watch, okay, let's take Korean. Like, I'm going to watch K-dramas and listen to K-pop and do this website and this website and this app and this app and this app. And then you don't have time to do those 7 things, like just pick one, stick to it, keep it simple, like stick to it and stick to like 15 minutes a day, just doing that one thing. So you don't get like burned out by having too many things going on. Yeah.
And then you can switch. So like I've gotten to the point where I don't use the apps as much. Like I still use them, and it depends on which point in your language you are, but then like moving on to other resources. So like with German, I'm now more, watching like kid shows on Netflix and listening to like news shows in German from like Radio Vienna, like Radio Wien. They do like news in easy German. So that's kind of like, I don't know if it's like a A2 or B1 level more or less.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That is a good point. We didn't talk about like our apps, do you graduate out of them eventually? Like, are they just for beginning? I don't know. I don't have the answer to this. I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I feel like that is how I've viewed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, great place to start and get some really good basics. And yeah, I said like the vocab is a great I think a benefit, but then I think grammar might be
Lacking.
a disadvantage of them. So
Mm-hmm.
you might want to get your grammar elsewhere. But then apps like Mango Languages also gives you like they do give you grammatical notes, but what I like about them is they give you cultural notes too.
Uh-huh.
So with German, they'll say like, oh, so in like northern Germany they say this, but in southern Germany they'll say it this way, and in Austria they'll do it this way.
Yeah,
Um,
that's very helpful.
yeah, so especially for languages that are, if you're doing, say, like if you're learning Polish, then you don't get as much of that because it's one country, and
Mm-hmm.
um,
So they're
yeah,
not telling
dialects.
us what
But
the
yeah,
gurales say in the
right, yeah,
mountains.
you're not gonna worry about the dialects as much.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's just cultural like info that they can say,
Yeah, oh, definitely. But it's not like with Spanish. If you go to Spain versus if you go to
Yeah.
Guatemala, that'll be different.
And even all the Latin American countries sometimes have different words for things.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic. So, in conclusion, we just want to encourage you to think about how you learn best and think about what sort of things work for you and, try things out. Download apps that are free and try them, see if it works. And, don't be afraid to delete it if it doesn't work for you.
Hmm.
If you're not liking it, just get rid of it because you don't want to clutter up, let's say, like your little folder with all your language stuff, because it will be easier if you just have that one app that you're consistently going to.
Yeah, don't feel bad about picking one thing versus having a whole set of resources. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely once in a while reevaluate and look for other things as well.
Yeah, that's true. And use a combination of both, or just do apps, or just take notes, whatever works for you. I think we're not here to tell you what's the best method. um, Both Marcin and I learn differently. We use these resources differently, and I think even as individuals we're going to use them differently as we progress. Like Marcin was saying, he started with Duolingo, but now he's moved on to other things. And yeah, reassess it all the time.
Yeah, now I'm finding out Netflix's subtitles in German are pretty much on every kid show different than just what they say. So
Oh,
it's almost harder because I'm trying to listen to one thing and read another at the same time.
yeah, that frustrates me so much when they do that in movies.
Mhm. Yeah.
Why aren't they just typing them verbatim? I don't know.
Yeah. It's like they're simplifying it. So you
Mm-hmm.
get them, similar messages, but definitely different.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one thing when you're listening to German and reading English, and they're
Mhm.
not exactly the same because you're like, oh,
Right.
it's translated.
Yeah.
But when you're listening to German and reading
It's
German,
yeah.
you're expecting to see what you're hearing.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
noticed that
yeah.
with French movies a lot. And it would be like, the
Mhm.
students would be like, why aren't they, why is it different what's down below? I'm like, I don't know. They're just
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. So it's probably because whoever was charged with translating didn't get like a full salary for the whole show, and it was like, yeah, just do an abridged version. We'll pay you a little less for that.
Maybe. Who knows? If you are a translator for TV, reach out and let us know.
Yeah. Let us know if my last minute anti-capitalist like critique is on point.
Or let us know how to get that job, because it would be fun to
True.
watch and subtitle shows. I could do that.
I have looked at like Polish TV shows that were translated into English, and
Mm-hmm.
how I like shaken my head at how bad the translations were.
Yeah.
Um, Thinking like, oh, I wish I had that job. I'd do it
There's,
better.
You and I are alike in many
Yeah.
respects of that. Well, we hope that this was somewhat helpful, and maybe we've encouraged you to try out some apps, or maybe get some books from the library, or do more listening. Maybe I'm going to check out audiobooks on Spotify. That sounds really cool, and I didn't even know that was
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah, I'll check out Lyrica,
Mm-hmm.
the app with the music.
I think
That
that's what
sounds
it is. I'm assuming
very
like
fun.
Lirica.
Yeah, that I think you're right. It's like learning with music.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that should be fun. So we hope that you found something interesting, something new,
Yeah.
something to think about. So let us know.
For sure. Yeah, you can reach out, and I will put some links into the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed that episode. We would love to hear if you prefer notes or if you prefer apps or if you do a mix of both. If you have any great resources to share with us, please let us know. You can find us on Instagram at thefutureisbilingual, and you can write us an email at tfibpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, everybody.
No. But
okay, it's easy.
That is...
We didn't even plan to talk about this, but here we go.
It's also an old person thing to say.
Luckily, I know what that is because you wrote it in the show notes.